All right, welcome. If you're a surgical assistant, I want you to listen up. Your #1 job in the trauma bay. It's probably not what you think. We're going to talk about the single biggest shift in initial trauma care, a change that completely redefines your first, most critical, life-saving move.
So let's just jump right into it. Picture this. The gurney crashes through the doors, it's chaos. A dozen things are happening all at once. But in the middle of all that noise, what's the one thing, the single threat that's going to kill your patient the fastest?
The answer is, well, it's brutally simple and immediate. Massive, uncontrolled bleeding. Yeah. Before a blocked airway, before a collapsed lung, this is what gets them. EXsanguinating hemorrhage can literally drain the life out of a patient in minutes, sometimes even seconds. It's the apex predator in the trauma bay, no question.
And, because of that undeniable reality, the entire foundation of trauma assessment, that classic algorithm we all had drilled into us, it's been completely rewritten. There's a new first step.
So for decades, right, the mantra was always ABC, airway, breathing, circulation. It's been hammered into every single one of us. But that whole foundation, it's changing. We've actually put a letter before the A. And look, this isn't just some minor tweak. This is a flat-out revolution in priorities. It forces us to deal with that catastrophic bleeding before we even think about touching the airway.
So what's this X all about? It stands for eXsanguinating hemorrhage. We're talking about that catastrophic external bleeding, the kind that doesn't just need a little attention. It demands immediate, super aggressive control. Think of the X as a big red stop sign in your brain. It makes the entire team just stop, find that bleed, and control it before anyone does anything else.
Okay, so how do we actually manage the X? Well, it really boils down to 3 core moves. First, direct manual pressure. I mean, your hands are your first and best tool, always. Then, wound packing. You're driving that gauze deep into the wound, creating pressure from the inside out. And finally, the big one, tourniquet application. These are the skills you have to be able to whip out in seconds. Let's zoom in on the tourniquet for a second, because its story is a perfect example of how battlefield medicine can totally change the game in civilian care. I mean, this is a tool that was once feared, even thrown out, only to make this incredible comeback as a life-saving hero. If you look at this timeline, you can see the tourniquet's just dramatic history. Its rise, its fall, and then its resurrection. Back in the World Wars, they were everywhere. But the applications were pretty crude, and that led to a lot of complications, and this deep-seated fear of limb loss. So for decades, they were basically a last resort. But then, in the conflicts of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the US military decided to take another look. They developed new protocols, and wow, the results were just staggering.
Just look at this number, 85%. That is the unbelievable decrease in deaths from extremity hemorrhage that the US military saw after they brought the tourniquet back into standard practice. It is absolutely no exaggeration to say this simple device completely changed combat casualty care. And now, it's doing the same thing for civilian trauma. And, the tourniquets we use today aren't just some random straps. They're purpose-built medical devices. Organizations like the Committee on Technical Combat Casualty Care, you'll hear it called COTOC, they've tested and approved specific models like the ones you see here. For you, as a surgical assistant, knowing how to slap one of these on effectively, that's a core competency. No way around it. Okay, let's move on, because putting on the tourniquet, while it's absolutely the critical first step, is not the end of the story. Not even close. The second that thing is on, a clock starts ticking. All right, so you've done it. The AX is under control. That massive bleeding has stopped. Your patient is stabilized in the trauma bay. The immediate threat is gone. So, now what? What's the next critical thought that needs to pop into your head? The answer is something called tourniquet conversion. This is a very deliberate, very calculated process of swapping that tourniquet out for another way to control the bleeding. And why do we do this? Simple. Because while a tourniquet saves a life, leaving it on for too long can absolutely cost a limb. Now, this is not something you rush into. The patient has to be stable, completely out of shock. You get in there, you assess the wound directly, apply a solid pressure dressing, and only then do you carefully loosen that tourniquet, all while being ready to crank it back down in a heartbeat. And the crucial thing here is the clock. After about 2 hours, the risk of permanent limb damage starts to climb, and it climbs fast. Okay, so tourniquets are amazing for arms and legs, right? Miraculous even. But this brings up a really big, really obvious question. What do you do about the bleeding you can't wrap a tourniquet around? This is where we run into the challenge of non-compressible hemorrhage.
We're talking about bleeding deep inside the chest, the abdomen, or the pelvis. Or think about those tricky junctional spots, the groin, the armpit, the neck. You just can't put a tourniquet on those places. There's no way to get that pressure all the way around the vessel. And this is where the game completely changes. These cases demand immediate surgical intervention, and that's where your skills in the OR come in.
So, even though those really complex bleeds need the OR, the initial principle stays exactly the same. Let's bring it all back home to that one single clear mandate for the moment you first lay hands on any trauma patient.
And this chart, this just illustrates the new hierarchy of trauma care perfectly. Just look at the priority here. Stop the bleed isn't just on the list, it pretty much is the list. It towers over airway and breathing. It is your first and your most impactful action. Everything else, everything, depends on you getting this right away. Let's be 100% clear about this. Your actions in those first few moments are decisive. As a surgical assistant, you are not just an assistant in this situation. You are the primary actor. You are the one controlling that catastrophic bleeding. You are the difference maker. The difference between a patient who makes it to the operating room and one who doesn't. And so, that leaves us with this one final thought. The trauma bay doors fly open. The clock is ticking. You see that life-threatening bleed. What is your first move? Because the answer to that question and the speed you act on it is quite literally everything.